How to take a class picture. Part 2. A stitched panorama. Next, a stitched panorama shot. Graduation class Pano picture. 550 graduates, 3-shot stitch. Using the senior Pano as a guide, here we are going to make a freshman class panel. We have two pictures, top and bottom. The top picture is designed for a 2-page spread. That gap in the middle is where the gutter will be. The bottom picture, without that gap, is meant for a single page. How were the stitched panels shot? This is an overhead plan. We are shooting from the bleachers on the opposite side of the field. At the top of this picture is the home bleachers where the freshmen are sitting. We are on the visitors' bleachers at the bottom of the picture. The distance between the shooting position at the top of the visitors' bleachers to the freshmen is approximately 100 yards. So why so far away? Perspective. Distance reduces two perspective distortions. Number one, the difference in image size of a person in the first row versus a person in the back row. Number two, the difference in the image size of the person in the middle versus a person on the side of the group. The closer you are to the group, the greater the difference in image size will be. By going far away, you reduce that distortion to the point where you basically don't see it, hopefully. Next, you raise the position of the camera to shoot down towards the group. If you shoot on the football field, you're going to be shooting up to the group. We want to shoot down to the group. So we shoot from the top of the visitors' bleachers. Months before the shoot. Number one, plan the shot. Number two, do a test shoot. Number one, plan the shot. Where do the students have to sit? What are the shots for the stitch? Is it a 2-shot stitch or will it be a 3-shot stitch? Determine what focal length and lens you will need. To do this, do an initial test with a wide range zoom, like an 18-140 or 50-200. All you want to do is figure out what focal length you will need. This is not trying to use the lens you will use. Don't reinvent the wheel. On your first year, you have prior year's class pictures to use as a reference for planning the seating layout. Document what you do for future years. Your second and later years, use your experience from the first year to adjust. Was the space for the gutter wide enough or was it too narrow? Was the total width too wide or too narrow? Now we plan the shot and the seating. This is in 2 parts. First is the seating. This particular plan is set up for a 2-page spread. A 2-page spread has a gutter in the middle. That blue rectangle represents the gutter. Then you have the red squares which represent the left and right pages. The sidelines have to be at an angle. They cannot be straight. Look at on the top picture. The 4 aisles coming down the bleacher are in reality parallel to each other. But in this picture, they are not parallel. They look like they're tilted in towards the top. That is the problem. It's perspective. In order to have your picture have a straight vertical sideline, you need to line up the students to line up with the red square. To do that, they are going to have to sit inside of a tilted sideline. Look at the bottom picture. This is going to be what the final picture looks like. If you look at the bleacher supports underneath the bleachers, you can see where they are supposedly going straight up and down. So you can see the edge of the picture is actually going to the outside as it goes up. That is how you have to make your sidelines tilted up at the same amount. Next, now that we figured out where the students will be, we need to figure out what focal length lens we need. So you have the red squares. What you will do is get your camera and lens and zoom in so your camera will cover this red rectangles. In this particular setup, on a Nikon APS-C camera, I needed approximately 120 millimeters to cover each of the red squares. Note something. This is on a Nikon APS-C camera. If you use a Canon APS-C camera, the focal length will be different. If you use a full-frame camera, your focal length will be different. If the width of your field is different than my field, your focal length may be different. Remember I said it's 100 yards from shooting position to the bleachers? If you have a wider field, you may require 130 or 140 millimeters for that particular range. So that is why you get a wide range zoom and you check to determine what focal length you will need to cover the red squares. And you don't want to cover exactly. You need to cover a little bit more. Give yourself some room. Do a test shot. First, set up the camera. Set up a tripod. You're using the tripod so your left and right pictures will be even. All you're doing is moving the tripod head left to right. That eliminates hand-holding variation. Like if you're tilting the camera one way for left and the next on different way for your right shot. Next, you're going to level the camera. Leveling the camera makes it easier for your stitching program to stitch the two pictures together. It doesn't have to try and compensate for a tilted picture on the left and another tilted picture on the right. Next, you're going to determine the exposure. Set the camera to P. Note the exposure. Write it down. Because now you're going to set the camera to full manual mode. Set it to M. Then enter the exposure that you wrote down from your P exposure. So Y set to manual. Look at the image in the red square. That shows where the two stitches came together. You can see a vertical line between the left and right. So the left side of the image is darker than the right side. That is the problem. The camera metered differently for the left and right. And when the stitching program put it together, it did not compensate for the fact that the exposure was different. If you set it to manual, the exposure on the left and right will be identical, and you will not have that vertical line in your picture. Next, shoot a test. You want to verify that the shots will stitch. There has to be enough overlap for the stitching software to stitch the shots. You don't want to find out after your panorama shot that your stitching software can't stitch the two shots together. You want to find out any problems before that. That is why you do it during a test. If it can't stitch, figure out why. Go back and try it again. On the day of the shoot, you need to prep on the home bleachers. You're going to mark the bleachers for the gutter and the side. You need to have someone direct the students to sit inside your markers. Mark the bleachers, the pink lines on this image. Go to Amazon and get surveyor's marking tape. Pretty inexpensive. And you're going to use it to mark the place where you want the students to sit. If any of the students are sitting outside of that line, they're not going to be in the picture. The shoot. You're going to be shooting from the visitors' bleachers. Set up the camera, tripod, level the camera. Determine the exposure. Did the light change? It may have changed since you shot it during testing. See what the correct exposure is on the shoot day. Set the camera to M, set the exposure. Then shoot several sets at different exposures. Because of lighting, one exposure may not quite be correct. For example, you may be getting glare, which might be throwing your meter off. Then take a backup shot. Take a full width shot with one shot in case your stitch fails. Tips. Other stuff to bring. Two-way radio or cell phone. You cannot yell loud enough to reach 100 yards to the organizers on the other side of the field. We tried. Test the radios before the shoot. Some of these inexpensive radios, the audio quality is so bad you can barely understand people. Make sure you can understand people when you're talking. Binoculars. From 100 yards away, you cannot see what is going on with your bare eyes. This is why you have to visually check with your binoculars. Both of these two pictures, look at the red circle. Top picture, you have a student's father right next to him on the left. He's going to be in the picture like one of the students. You need to advise him to move a little bit to his right so he's out of the picture. Towards the middle of the picture at the bottom, you have a guy sitting on the track looking at his cell phone. He's right in the picture. You need to get him out of the way. Bottom picture. Well, that same guy thought he was out of the way by hiding behind the cheerleaders. Except he wasn't hiding completely behind. You can still see him looking at his cell phone. And on the left side of the picture, a guy with a walker. He should be seated down, not standing up like that. These are some of the issues that you cannot see with your bare eyes from 100 yards away, and why you need to use the binoculars. Next, stitch the shot. There are several programs you can use. AutoStitch, Huggin, Adobe Photoshop Elements, Lightroom, and Photoshop, and others. I used Huggin, and it seems to work for me, and it's also free. So what gear did I use? I used two sets. Gear set 1, APS-C. Cameras, Nikon D7200. The lens, a Nikon 70-200 f4 with a tripod collar and a tripod. Gear 2, Micro Four Thirds, Olympus EM1 Mark II. The lens, Olympus 40-150 2.8 with the tripod collar and a tripod. Other notes, if you have a high resolution camera, 40 plus megapixels, You may have the sensor resolution to do the panel picture in a single shot rather than stitching 2 shots. However, to do this, your lens has to resolve enough to provide the detail to the camera. My experience has been that the lens is the weak link in the chain. Your camera may be able to resolve enough, but your lens may not be able to provide that resolution to the camera. Hence, shooting 2 shots will provide you the resolution that a single shot can't. The end. Thank you and good luck, and please like and subscribe.